Donald Trump protected him so much, he knows something really significant.
I don't think this goes anywhere other than to Michael Flynn and potentially his son.
Welcome to AM Joy. This Thanksgiving, we got yet another signal that Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russia's interference in our presidential election continues to pick up steam. NBC News confirming information first reported by the New York Times that lawyers for Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, cut ties with Trump's attorneys, refusing to share any more information about Mueller's investigation. Now, typically during an investigation, defense attorneys for separate clients agree to cooperate with one another to share information so they can anticipate the prosecutor's case and piece together a common strategy to fight back. Lawyers for Trump and Flynn, who, along with his son, is under investigation for his foreign business dealings and his contacts with Russian officials, had been doing that up until this week. According to the Times, one reason for the change could be that, quote, it is unethical for lawyers to work together when one client is cooperating with prosecutors and another is still under investigation, unquote, which ultimately makes this news a possible sign of Trump's worst nightmare: Michael Flynn cooperating with Mueller's investigation and potentially handing over incriminating evidence against his former boss and the Trump campaign. Joining me now, Malcolm Nance, author of The Plot to Hack America, journalist and scholar of authoritarian states Sarah Kendzior, and MSNBC legal analyst Paul Butler. And Paul, I'm going to start with you on this question of cooperation. Norm Eisen, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, sent this tweet out on Thursday, sent this on Thursday. I negotiated a cooperation deal for a target with Mueller's office when he was U.S. attorney, and let me tell you, he's not going to give one to Flynn unless he implicates someone up the ladder. That means Kushner, Don Jr., or Big Daddy. They're all having indigestion tonight. Your thoughts?
So joint defense agreements are agreements when people are subjects of investigation and they want to share information because they think, hey, we're all in this together, except when they're not. So now Flynn has been persuaded by either his attorneys or by special counsel Mueller that he's got different interests from President Trump. So it could mean that he's cooperating with the special counsel, which means he's singing like a canary to try to avoid what literally could be decades of prison time. Or it could mean that he's going to fight this, and in his defense, he will implicate President Trump. Either way, it's very bad news for Donald Trump.
And to stay with you just for a second, Paul, the New York Times put a caveat in their story saying that, attend in terms of them cutting ties, that some lawyers withdraw from information sharing arrangements as soon as they begin negotiating with prosecutors, and such negotiations sometimes fall apart. Do you see any, signs here that Flynn could be maybe not all the way prepared to cooperate, but trying to negotiate a deal for himself, or maybe his son, to try to save Michael Flynn Jr. And sort of what would he have to offer prosecutors? Would he have to offer information that would incriminate Donald Trump, Paul Manafort? What would he have to give them in order to get a deal, maybe for his son?
So remember, Michael Flynn was the national security advisor, and so that's a very high-level position. He's now got lots of exposure for false statements, for not disclosing that he was an agent of foreign governments at the time that he was working for the Trump campaign and then in the White House. So again, he has a lot of incentive to try to bring the goods against somebody who's higher up on the chain, which means somebody in the Oval Office. So it's perfectly right that there's not a done deal now. He's got a lot of pressure, though, to really deliver somebody high up. And again, that means President Trump, somebody in the Oval Office, or somebody in President Trump's family. But again, obviously, Mueller is a guy with integrity. He only wants the goods if they're true. And
right.
A concern sometimes about people who cooperate is when they have a lot of incentive, sometimes they say stuff that's not true to try to help themselves. So this has to proceed very carefully.
Absolutely. All right. So let me go to Malcolm on this, because now, so we all now know sort of the cast of characters who are involved in the alleged Russia member, the potential Russia collusion with the Trump campaign. Michael Flynn, let's start with him. If you will go back to, let's travel back to when Jim Comey testified in front of a congressional committee and then released the memo which showed that in his view, Trump was asking him to end the Flynn investigation, to go easy on Michael Flynn. We have also the stories of Donald Trump reaching out to Michael Flynn and saying, stay strong. Would, in your view, Malcolm, just having, lived this entire situation for over a year, is Michael Flynn the person who most likely has the answer to whether or not the Trump campaign colluded with Russia, or is his real jeopardy that he was making money on the side with Russia and Turkey, et cetera?
He's got 4 major issues that are going to come down on him. One, taking money from Russia today while still holding a top secret SCI security clearance and not saying anything about it. That could lead him to charges of being an unwitting intelligence asset, or that he was being recruited by Russia. 2, taking money from the Turks in order to extradite illegally and a U.S. resident to Turkey, which is kidnapping and federal conspiracy charges. That's bad. 3, then there's making that phone call to Moscow in December of last year. That is significant because that could implicate Mike Pence and Donald Trump as having ordered him to do that, and he may have lied about it. And finally, he may have been the executive officer of all the dirty tricks campaigns to get the WikiLeaks information, the information from the Russian lawyer, and the information from the Podesta leaks and all the rest of those to find Hillary Clinton's emails, which means he's neck deep in all of them. The question is, which are the easy ones that Mueller's going for? I think he's going for Russia. But I'm sorry, not Russia, the Turkey and Russia payments, because that's documentary. He can get that. But finally, it was Jay Sekulow that dropped a hint about Flynn's security clearance the other day and saying Obama administration cleared him. That leads me to believe that it's more than likely the Moscow phone call and him possibly being an unwitting asset of Russian intelligence. It's very bizarre that he would actually blame Obama for giving Flynn a top secret security clearance.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget that Sally Yates, who was then the acting attorney general, warned the White House that he could be subject to blackmail and that it still took them almost 2 weeks to get rid of him. All right, let's move on to person number 2, door number 2, Jared Kushner. I'm going to come to you on this, Sarah. We will recall, going back again, that Jared Kushner was one of the people who urged Donald Trump to fire Director Jim Comey, who was FBI director at the time, which could be one of the obstruction of justice charges, firing Comey to cover up the investigation. We now have a new piece in Vanity Fair that talks about Jared Kushner actually being worried. And here's a quote. Despite Kushner's efforts to project confidence about Robert Mueller's probe, he expressed worry after the indictments of Paul Manafort and Rick Gates about how far the investigation would go. Quote, do you think they'll get the president? Kushner asked a friend, according to a person briefed on the conversation. And Sarah, in your view, just having reviewed this case and looked at it for over a year at this point, do you think Jared Kushner should be a little bit more worried about Jared Kushner and not just the president getting got?
I don't really think it's in Jared Kushner's nature to be particularly worried about consequences, since he's essentially lived a life committing crimes consequence-free. The consequences I'm worried about are that for the United States, where a problem of nepotism has become a problem of national security. We know that Kushner is implicated. We know he lied on his clearance forms. We know he had, I think hundreds of illicit contacts with foreign officials, especially Russia, over the years that he didn't reveal. We know that he was involved in the firing of Comey. We know he was involved with Manafort and the campaign team in the transition, and he's basically been implicated at every level. But of course, his father-in-law, is the president, and this administration has abused executive power in order to override protocols that technically should keep people like Kushner in check, and he hasn't been. So, perhaps he's a little more worried in light of Manafort's indictment, in light of pending indictments against Flynn, perhaps. But the corruption goes very deep, and I don't think that we should be needlessly optimistic about the direction that this is going to go.
Yeah, and Paul, let's go to Manafort. Sarah has brought up Manafort. Let's go to Paul Manafort. McClatchy has a new piece out talking about the fact that Manafort's travel to Russia was actually more extensive than we previously knew, that his flight records showed that he had these deeper Kremlin ties than previously known. I'm going to start with you on this, Paul Butler, because Manafort is already, we knowingly in legal trouble. Would the prosecutors have to get Manafort on something to do with collusion, or could the corruption of his business practices separate from the campaign be enough to force him to flip on Donald Trump potentially?
Well, you know, it's all fair game. So on the one hand, we've got plenty of evidence that he's got exposure for stuff that has nothing to do with Russia or the Trump campaign. And we've seen that Mueller, he goes in, so he wouldn't have any problem indicting Manafort on all of that stuff in order to get him to cooperate. But make no mistake, the subject of this investigation is whether the Trump campaign conspired with the Russians in order to subvert American democracy. And so if Manafort has information about that, that's what's most of interest to Special Counsel Mueller.
And same question to you on that, Malcolm, because Manafort obviously ran the Trump campaign. He's brought in late spring, early summer to try to manage the convention process. But he, at the same time, has these separate ties to Russia and Ukraine. Do you get the sense that Manafort, sort of similar to what I asked you about Michael Flynn, is his exposure that he may have helped to direct Russia collusion into the campaign, or that he's just separately got corruption issues that have to do just sort of tangentially and coincidentally with Russia?
Well, I think the things that we're actually seeing on the surface in the indictments that he got, those are just the pressure points of his past misbehavior in the Ukraine. The point is he had a special skill set to come in here and bring these Russian-based corruption and dirty tricks operations into campaigns in the Ukraine, and he was brought into this campaign. And the question is, was he Moscow's man? Is this an issue of him just being a dirty trickster, or is this an issue of him being an actual asset of the Kremlin?
Yeah.
And that's a big difference between, that's like Espionage Act sort of stuff there.
Yeah.
Can I make a quick aside for Jared Kushner that I think we've missed on? I read that article with great interest, and when he made that statement of, "Do you think they'll get the president?" Coming from an intelligence perspective, somebody who's done a boatload of wiretapping in my time, if I were to hear that sentence, that would immediately indicate to me that he has information that he feels he's the crux of that will lead up the chain of command. That would be a key point for me.
Yeah.
Why would you make that statement if you didn't already know the answer that you got it? Also, he is flush with dirty contacts with Moscow related to money. And I think he's very afraid that he's about to get the Manafort treatment. And he's going to, because Mueller is throwing a circle around foreign capital that may have come from foreign intelligence agencies and influenced these people to do things that were conspiracy against the United States.
Yeah, we still haven't gotten an answer to the questions that we wanted from the White House about whether or not Jared Kushner has been discussing some of his financial needs, including 666 Fifth Avenue, when he's been jaunting around the world to Saudi Arabia and other places. We'd love to get an answer to that. So if the White House has got anybody monitoring the show, we'd love to get answers to those questions we asked you guys about a week ago. Last question to you, Sarah Kendzior. You've now seen this probe go international. There was an arrest of one of Putin's favorite oligarchs on tax evasion charges. This was an arrest that took place in France. Could the Kremlin now start to becoming a little bit worried that the oligarchs themselves will now be squeezed in terms of hiding money? And we all know that hiding money in real estate, including in Trump properties, is a thing they do.
I think to some degree this was always their concern. This kind of guided their presence in the campaign, and that one of their main objectives was to make sure that there were not sanctions against Russia and that oligarchs could continue their financial activity unimpeded. I think, of course, they're somewhat concerned about this investigation, but it certainly hasn't stopped them really from accomplishing their goals throughout the year. I hope the investigation picks up. I hope things move faster, because I don't think that we necessarily can handle the repercussions on a national security level of what has been done. And so while it's kind of rough for the oligarchs, it's a hell of a lot rougher for the people of the United States. So I'm glad that Mueller is pressing down. I'm glad that, as Malcolm said, the net is widening and tightening at the same time. But at the same time, we are running out of time. So I hope they consider that. Yeah,
well said, Sarah Kendzior. Thank you very much. Malcolm Nance, Sarah Kendzior, thank you both. Paul Butler will be back later in the show. And one more note on Russiagate. Could Robert Mueller be Times Person of the Year? Donald Trump claimed on Twitter Saturday that he turned down the honor that the magazine was probably going to confer on him. Time said they never contacted him and said any such thing. Trump has a particular obsession with being on the cover of Time, even creating fake versions of a cover to hang at his properties. He was quickly corrected, of course, by Time's editors, who will actually make the announcement on December 6th. So, who do you think it could be? Go to our AM Joy.
He totally denies it. He says it didn't happen. And, you know, you have to listen to him also. You're talking about, he said 40 years ago this did not happen. So, you know, let me just tell you, Roy Moore denies it. That's all I can say. He denies it. And by the way, he totally denies it. The women are Trump voters. Most of them are Trump voters. All you can do is you have to do what you have to do. He totally denies it.
That was Donald Trump's answer when asked if electing an accused child molester was better than electing a Democrat in next month's U.S. Senate race in Alabama. Trump's defense of Republican Roy Moore, who's accused of sexual misconduct with multiple teenagers when he was a prosecutor in his 30s, is risky given the president's own history of sexual assault allegations. And while it wasn't exactly a rah-rah endorsement, it was enough for Moore to use in a fundraising email to his supporters, writing, "I appreciate Donald Trump for defending my honor and my character." And joining me now, Republican strategist Evan Siegfried, former Breitbart media consultant Kurt Bardella, and Washington Post opinion writer Jennifer Rubin. I'm going to start with you here at the table, Evan. The current polling, which the polling has been all over the place. This is a WBRC strategy research poll dated November 20th, just before Thanksgiving. It has Roy Moore at 47, Doug Jones at 45. How on earth is a man accused serially of essentially being a child molester still up in any poll?
Tribalism. I think it's been this us versus them narrative where we have, as Republicans said, if you don't like a certain piece of news, even though it's factual,
right,
you can ignore it because it's fake news. And it's much more news is based upon opinion than actual facts in this type of a world. And at the same time, I think there are people who say, well, who are making moral justification saying it's better to have Roy Moore who will vote the way we vote, which Mo Brooks said about 2 weeks ago, than having Doug Jones in there. Well, I don't like Doug Jones's policies, but I think he's far better than Roy Moore is. At the same time, you have this poll from JMC Analytics that came out 2 weeks ago that said 29% of voters are more likely to vote for Roy Moore now because of the allegations. And that shows the moral rot within the Republican Party when we're going out and saying we are the party of family values and morality when we're defending a man who's accused of such horrible, disgraceful behavior. It really makes a lot of people have a second to look and say, why do we want to be a part of the Republican Party?
Yeah, and Kurt, you know, you have the enforcer, who isn't really good at elections or politics, but for some reason still seems to have the president dancing on a string, your old friend Steve Bannon. And this is him talking on his radio show on Friday about that race. Take a listen.
And I think that's what the president said. He said, hey, this stuff is all 40 years old. It's all allegations. It's, you know, and let you guys, and like you said, let the people of Alabama decide. And that's why I'm a big believer. Let the folks in Alabama decide. So it's, I think it's going to be very straightforward. I think the president showed huge courage in the face of just withering criticism.
I agree.
By the pundit class. I just think it's great.
I think Marlowe is the editor of Breitbart News. So the idea that it is courageous for Donald Trump, who is himself a serially accused sexual assaulter of women, it's courageous for him to stand up for an accused child molester. That is where the far right of the Republican Party is right now. How mainstream is that view in your opinion?
You know, I think that you've seen that it's really not that mainstream. There have been a number of Republicans, in very leadership positions who have spoken out against Roy Moore, who have said that they don't want him to be in Congress, who have floated the idea that they would try to expel him if he indeed won and was seated. So I think, again, this is a very concentrated group of Republican people who really actually masquerade as Republicans, even though they're really not Republicans. They don't stand for anything. They have no moral compass. They have no values of any kind. They are not guided by any core ideological issue or perspective, much like the president. They go wherever they think they can go. They really exist to agitate, to distract, to disrupt. And what Bannon is doing it's classic vintage Bannon. It's wherever the establishment is, I don't want to be. It doesn't matter what the issue is. It doesn't matter what the topic is. It's just a matter of I don't want to do anything that aligns me with Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan or quote-unquote establishment Republicans. And so he does the exact opposite to be contrary to that. And that's what President Trump generally does as well. Anytime you think you know what they'll do, you think that they'll listen to reason, follow common sense, they do the exact opposite, almost just to spite everybody else.
But you know, it's interesting because they don't do that, Jennifer, when it comes to things like, cutting taxes for corporations or policies that harm the poor. They're not contrary to the establishment when it comes to things that hurt poor people or women or gay people or people of color, they're right with the establishment and they're fine with them. It's just interesting that they're only against them on things like, you know, whether or not to defend a child molester. Let's listen to another recipient of Robert Mercer and Becca Mercer's money. That would be Kellyanne Conway, whose polling firm used to be supported by them. She's now working for the White House. And here she is on Fox News on Monday talking about the Alabama Senate race.
Doug Jones in Alabama, folks, don't be fooled. He'll be a vote against tax cuts. He's weak on crime, weak on borders. He's strong on raising your taxes. He's terrible for property owners.
So
and Doug
vote Roy
Jones
Moore?
is a doctrinaire liberal, which is why he's not saying anything and why the media are trying to boost him.
So vote Roy Moore?
I'm telling you that we want the votes in the Senate to get this tax bill through.
So yes, vote Roy Moore. I mean, and Jennifer, and the idea that the guy who prosecuted two of the Klansmen who blew up the 16th Street Baptist Church and killed 4 little kids in the 1960s is weak on crime. It's pretty breathtaking.
Well, to quote Ivanka Trump, who I never quote, there's a special place in hell for mothers who defend accused child molesters, and that would be Kellyanne Conway. I have no words to describe how really atrocious, how despicable this is. I do want to differ with Kurt in that he sees this noxious branch of the Republican Party as a segment. Unfortunately, I think that is the Republican Party. You can't kind of pass them off as some fringe group when it's the President of the United States, everybody in the White House, the head of the RNC, the Vice President of the United States. We go down the line. And let's face it, the party has already embraced someone who has been serially accused of sexual assault. That's the president. That's Paul Ryan. That's Mitch McConnell. That's everybody. So listen, to make this distinction that somehow there are good Republicans on this issue and bad Republicans, this is the horror of Donald Trump, which he has infested and deformed an entire national political party. And I think they're rotten to the core now, the whole lot of them.
Yeah, Kurt, I mean, isn't that the case? I mean, the Bannon wing owns the party now. They've taken over. Ideologically, Paul Ryan runs behind the president, you know, like a fan. They're all in lockstep. How can you make a distinction?
Well, and again, I don't disagree with that, Jennifer, at all. I mean, no one's been more vocal about the rotting core that Steve Bannon and Donald Trump have perpetrated amongst the Republican Party than I have. It's why I barely consider myself a Republican at this point and spend almost every week speaking out against them.
You like the weather out here.
But what I was speaking to is more directly the issue of defending a child sex predator. There have been a lot of people who are Republicans who are very quick to speak out against that. And that's not to say what all the other issues that have come out, all the other things that Donald Trump has done, well, they have sat compliantly silent as he's run roughshod over the Republican Party. I said a lot of the Republican Party died the night that Donald Trump was inaugurated, and everyone stood there clapping like a bunch of seals. And you know, it disturbs me. It's incredibly troubling. It's been terrible for this country. But on the issue of just specifically talking about whether you defend Roy Moore or not, there have been a lot of people in Republican leadership positions who have spoken out about that.
But nobody listened to them. And if they were influential within the party, you would see Roy Moore's support completely erode in Alabama and be polling in the teens.
There's no doubt
I think
about
that's
that.
a big problem. The two things that I worry about right now are, one, we've been accused of having a war on women, and this just perpetuates it. And two, I think there are a lot of Alabama voters who are on the fence, and then they look at the allegations against Al Franken, which are wholly separate. But they see Democrats sticking by him, and to them, that's a signal that they can stick by Roy Moore. I think Democrats need to come out much harder against Al Franken, and that would actually help Doug Jones in the long run.
Hold on a second. There is absolutely no symmetry between what Al Franken, but Al Franken is not being accused of being a child molester, and I think that's part of the problem. I think the conflation, the whataboutism among Republicans who try to put Roy Moore and Al Franken in the same sentence is part of the reason that your party has no credibility here.
No, I agree with you. There is no similarities between the two different accusations.
They don't belong in the same sentence at all.
But
they're not the same in any character at all.
But it's what I'm talking about is how people view it. I don't agree that they're the same at all.
People are insane because there's literally nothing that the
and you know, Democrats have not defended Al Franken. To the contrary, they're all calling. There are some liberal advocacy groups who have called for him to resign. There's an investigation that's pending. I haven't seen Nancy Pelosi come out and say Al Franken's a great guy.
Resulted in an expulsion, though.
By the way,
1800s.
The idea that Al Franken should be that there is any symmetry whatsoever. These guys are going to serve with Roy Moore if he wins and say absolutely nothing and vote with him and bet. It is absolutely absurd. I'm sorry, my little editorial here. Not even close to being the same. But I appreciate the discussion. Evan Siegfried. Kurt Bardella, thank you very much. Jennifer Rubin will be back. We're not kicking them out. They're just going to not be back.
Thanks, Joy.
Still, happy Thanksgiving, you guys. And coming up, Trump and Tiger are raising eyebrows. It's Saturday. I'll tell you why next.
But you know what? And I love golf. But if I were in the White House, I don't think I'd ever see Turnberry again. I don't think I'd ever see Doral again. I own Doral in Miami. I don't think I'd ever see many of the places that I have. I don't ever think I'd see anything. I just want to stay in the White House and work my ass off, make great deals, right? Who's going to leave?
Well, so much for that pledge. Since taking office, Donald Trump has spent at least 80 days at his golf properties. He rarely admits to hitting the links, but Friday was an exception when he tweeted, "After Turkey Call, I will be heading over to Trump National Golf Club, Jupiter, to play golf quickly with Tiger Woods and Dustin Johnson." And this is not the first time Trump has teamed up with Tiger Woods. The golf superstar helped design a golf course at a Trump-branded property in Dubai, which recently hired a construction company owned by the Chinese government, which could put Trump in violation, once again, of the Constitution's Emoluments Clause. Joining me now, David K. Johnston, author of It's Even Worse Than You Think, What the Trump Administration is Doing to America, and Richard Painter, former White House ethics lawyer for President George W. Bush. And Richard, I'm going to start with you on this. The idea that the President of the United States and golf phenom Tiger Woods would be designing golf courses together, and then he would be promoting playing golf with Tiger Woods. How flagrant do these violations of the Emoluments Clause have to be before somebody in Washington notices?
Well, the most serious allegations don't involve the golf courses. They involve the financing that he's getting from foreign governments, foreign government-owned banks, sovereign wealth funds, much of it undisclosed. He may be in debt for millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, to foreign nationals, some of whom may be connected to foreign governments. And none of this is disclosed because the Congress doesn't insist that it be disclosed. There's sheer hypocrisy here, and the golfing and all that is symbolic. I mean, here's a man who criticized President Obama for playing a few rounds of golf every now and then, and since this presidency started, he's been doing nothing but golfing on his own courses, trying to promote his businesses, and his sons flying all over the world promoting his businesses to foreign nationals, including foreign governments. This has got to stop, but it's not going to stop until Congress takes seriously its oversight duties, and they're not doing it because they also are hypocritical. They just want to cover for themselves and cover for the president.
You know, and it's interesting, David K. Johnston, you know, the United States goes around the world sort of, you know, lecturing people about democracy and how to do it. If you had a country in which, you know, you had resorts named after the leader of that country and golf courses named after the leader of that country, and then professional golf associations were playing golf on the links that are named after the president of that country, and his name was plastered all over the place everywhere you go, and foreign governments could come in and stay at his hotels and swipe their cards and pay him money, would we consider that country to be a typical normal Western democracy, or would we be questioning whether or not it is essentially just an open kleptocracy?
Well, what we're seeing is the emerging kleptocracy of the Trump administration, Joy. Richard is exactly right. Congress has an absolute duty here to act to reform the laws that allow Trump to not fully disclose what's going on with his finances, the decades of money laundering that he's been doing, his reliance on money from foreign governments, and using his position to promote his businesses. And the lawlessness of this administration you see all the time. You just had Kellyanne Conway on endorsing a candidate. Well, she was violating the Hatch Act when she did that. And Donald Trump continues to use his office to enrich his family. Now, that's not the principal reason he ran for president. Donald ran because he believes, of course, he should be president. He's superior to the rest of us. He should be in charge of the whole world. As he told the Australian Prime Minister Turnbull, you know, he's the greatest person in the world. But once in office, there are no moral boundaries to this man, and so he will do everything he can to deepen his family's pockets, even when it involves improper relationships for a president with foreign governments, foreign banks, foreign powers, and foreign individuals.
And, you know, Richard, the thing that's happening with Trump is sort of two pieces. On the one hand, it feels like his presidency is so toxic that it's tanking his brand on one side. And on the other side, he is still, to David K. Johnston's point, seeming to make money, whether it's the fees at Mar-a-Lago or at his hotel in New York. A couple of headlines for you. The Trump Organization is going to exit its deal with the Trump Soho Hotel in New York, which is struggling. It's got high vacancy rates. It is struggling. Trump doesn't own it. It's just a licensing deal where he gets money to have his name on the hotel. His name will come off that hotel. Forbes, a second item, Forbes has dropped Donald Trump down on its list of richest Americans. It's estimating his net worth now at $3.1 billion, down from $3.7 billion. He drops to number 248 from number 156. We know that it's very important to Trump to be on that list, but he's going down. And part of the reason for that is because a lot of his properties are struggling. The golf courses in New York are struggling. This is element 4. We can put it up for my team. His golf courses in a lot of places are struggling. A lot of his hotels are struggling. There was a project in Mississippi that they were going to open at a sort of a lower scale hotel that is sort of being scuttled. The one property that's making a lot of money is the hotel in D.C. in the former old post office building. And it's literally filled with lobbyists and foreign government officials who are paying to stay there. How is just not that hotel in and of itself? How can that be legal?
Well, it's not. It's illegal under the Amendments Clause of the Constitution. That's why he's been sued in 3 separate lawsuits in 3 different federal courts over this. It's clearly illegal, and I want to emphasize that the big money is the financing, and you may very well see foreign governments or foreign sovereign wealth funds bail out some of those projects that aren't doing so well in order to ingratiate themselves with the president. And this is exactly what the founders intended to prohibit under the Amendments Clause. But I get back to Congress. They have an oversight duty. They aren't doing anything. We're going to have to take a good hard look at Congress in 2018 because they're a bunch of hypocrites. You see the way they're pushing this sexual harassment thing, but they're going after Conyers. Yet who's calling Kellyanne Conway up to the House and say, hey, who are the names of all those guys, probably most of them white guys, who are harassing her? She claimed in 2016. Oh, they don't want to investigate that. The bottom line is they're hypocrites. They're covering for themselves. I've been a Republican for 30 years, but I'm not going to support people who will cover for a president who is violating the Constitution and apply a double standard to their own members of Congress. It's unacceptable.
And, you know, David K. Thompson, there's sort of a lack of fear. Obviously, Donald Trump doesn't fear Congress. They aren't doing anything about it. They have no interest in this issue whatsoever, even though it's plain as the nose on your face. You can read it in the Constitution. The Amendments Clause is right there. We just put it up. You know, I just had friends from Florida calling me about this mega yacht, this $400 million mega yacht by a Russian oligarch that was pulled up in Palm Beach, and all the speculation. Did the person, you know, the Russian oligarch who owns that yacht, was he hanging out at Mar-a-Lago? We don't even know who's paying the $200,000 fees to be members of his private club. I wonder if, in your view, knowing Donald Trump as long as you have, does he have any fear that there could be any chickens that come home to roost from all of this? What appears to be him profiting openly off the presidency and consorting with Russian oligarchs while he's under investigation for possible collusion with Russia?
Well, Donald would have some fear about this, but he has been masterful in pushing away law enforcement. He outdid 4 federal grand jury investigations. He committed income tax fraud and had 2 civil, not criminal, trials over it that he lost. He's admitted to sales tax fraud, and he's been found to have engaged in a conspiracy to cheat workers out of their money. But Donald has been very, very successful over the years at outwitting or running out the clock on law enforcement. And his friend here are weak disclosure laws. We need to thoroughly revamp our campaign finance and personal disclosure laws. Trump has not had to make an honest accounting of what he's doing. And by the way, when Forbes magazine tells you he's worth $3.1 billion, even Trump doesn't claim that. The statement he signed under oath is $1.4 billion. If you take all the $50 million up items and double them, you don't get to $2 billion. And I think those numbers are highly inflated. He has lots of cash flow. He doesn't have lots of unencumbered assets. And I hope Mueller gets us a proper net worth statement on Donald Trump, because I think it'll shock people when they discover how deeply he's involved with foreign money.
Yeah, I think one of the things that Donald Trump's presidency or election has shown is that a lot of us assumed that showing your tax returns as president of the United States was a law. It's not. It's just a tradition. And maybe that's something Congress could look into if we had a Congress that was interested in stuff like that. David K. Johnston and Richard Painter, thank you both. And up next, Trump uses the tragedy in Egypt to double down on his calls for a wall and a Muslim ban. That makes no sense at all. Up next, more AM Joy. While Egypt was still reeling from the mosque attack that officials called the country's deadliest terrorist attack in modern history, Donald Trump was using the incident to advance two of the most radical ideas on his agenda. Tweeting, quote, "We'll be calling the president of Egypt in a short while to discuss the tragic terrorist attack. With so much loss of life, we have to get tougher and smarter than ever before, and we will need the wall. We need the ban. God bless the people of Egypt." Joining me now is MSNBC legal analyst Paul Butler and Anousheh Hossain, contributing writer for Forbes magazine. And Anousheh, what on earth, what could be the thread, if you can extrapolate for us and even guess, between what happened in Egypt and building a wall and banning Muslims from the banning Muslims from the United States?
There's absolutely no connection, and I think Trump is genuinely confused. I mean, it's sad, but it's not surprising that our president, after the worst attack in Egyptian modern history, would waste no time to stoke anti-Muslim sentiment, stoke Islamophobia, and it just goes to demonstrate that Trump doesn't understand that Muslims are terrorism's greatest victims. We are murdered and slaughtered by ISIS on a daily basis and for years. And it's clear that Trump not only doesn't understand that, but he doesn't get that nobody hates ISIS more than Muslims.
And, you know, Paul, the interesting thing about it is that Donald Trump doesn't seem to have learned that whenever he weighs in on anything to do with his Muslim ban, it actually tanks his chances in court of getting it to stand up, because it makes it clear that he just wants to ban Muslims from the United States. Why does he not seem to get that, in your view?
Well, so he's already building a wall and banning folks in a symbolic way, right? So he, this week, excluded tens of thousands of Haitians from the United States who've been dispossessed by the earthquake. He's going back and forth on the Dreamers. That's within his executive power. What's not legal is to exclude people on the basis of their faith, which is why the lawyers keep saying in their pleadings, it's not a ban, it's not a ban. But then, as you note, Joy, these tweets make it clear that the president's intent is to exclude Muslims from entering the United States. And as several courts have made clear, that's unconstitutional. His tweets make it transparent. There's smoking gun evidence of his discriminatory intent.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Anousheh, you know, just as a political matter, if you just want to look at the raw politics of it, there was a time, I can think back to the George W. Bush era, when particularly Arab Muslims were very much a swing community, particularly in Florida. Yeah. This was a community that, you know, some leaned Republican and some leaned Democrat. It was sort of up for grabs. You know, Donald Trump has seemed to go out of his way to be just sort of extravagant in his disdain for the Muslim community. So did it surprise you that he paired that with what he was, I guess, portraying as sympathy for the people of Egypt?
You know, it didn't surprise me at all. But what is particularly sad about Donald Trump's tweets is that it's taking away attention and focus from the attack in Egypt. This was a really, I mean, if you read the details of this attack, it was so heinous. It was so violent. And can I just stipulate that it happened against a branch of Islam, the Sufis. That was the community that was attacked. You know, they were the people that were praying in this mosque. And they are the most peaceful and loving. It's a mystical sect of Islam. And, you know, their religion is all about, just like Islam is really, but they really focus on love and poetry. And if you know any of the works of the great Sufi poet Rumi, you'll know exactly who the Sufis are. So it was such a heinous and violent crime on such a peaceful community, and I have no idea, and neither does Trump really, how a racist ban and a dumb wall is going to help fight ISIS in the Middle East.
And you know, Anousheh, just to stay with you for a moment, because I think people don't, you know, zero in enough on the fact that part of what ISIS does, a lot of what they do, is accuse other Muslims of not being, in their view, the right kind of Muslim, and attacking them all over the world.
Exactly. We are literally their greatest victims. 90% of terrorism's victims are Muslim. And it also goes to show this incident that we're not a monolith. You know, it's like women. We're not all the same. There's 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, and there's so many varying sects. And just like in America and just like in Christianity and other religions, there's a very extreme sect. And really, a lot of Muslims don't even consider ISIS to be a part of Islam. They're just violent and they kill indiscriminately. And Muslims are some of their greatest victims. So this is really, how is a wall with Mexico going to help fight ISIS? And Egypt is not even on Trump's racist, dumb plan to have this travel ban. That's never going to work.
Yeah, just the same way that Christians disown people who claim to be Christian but who are extremists. I mean, the KKK claim that they're Christians, right?
Exactly.
Not everybody who claims your religion practices your religion. Paul, I wonder if you could just anticipate for us, there will be more lawsuits over the Muslim ban. I presume there will be lawsuits at some point over Donald Trump's idea to build a wall because there are takings clause issues about taking land to build it, etc. Could his tweets be used by the plaintiffs in cases like that?
Yeah, they already have, and we've seen judges, including the judge in Hawaii, credit his tweet. So, the difficult thing about bringing these cases is you have to prove that there's some intent to discriminate against people on the basis of their religion. And again, as much as the lawyers try to fix it up, the tweets are transparent. It's clear that what the president wants to do is to ban Muslims, period. And again, that is unconstitutional.
Yeah, and Anousheh, I guess on the wall, one more point to you on this. It does seem that Donald Trump is just using this transparently because he knows his base wants those two things equally. They want their wall and they want this Muslim ban. That was the driver of their support for him. But is there any evidence in your view that people who are connected to ISIS are streaming over the southern border, I guess going to Mexico as a way to get into the United States and then coming that way into the U.S.?
No, it doesn't make any sense, and I really don't think that we should take attention away from the fact that it's not the West against ISIS. It's all of us against ISIS. We must all be united. It's not Muslims against ISIS. It's all of us.
Yeah,
and that's what we should really focus on.
Amen. Well said. Paul Butler, Anousheh Hussain, thank you both very much. Keep it right here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keep it right here on MSNBC. Now face deportation after the Trump administration announced it would be revoking the temporary protected status, or TPS, that was extended by President Obama almost 8 years ago. Acting Homeland Security Secretary Elaine Duke set a deadline of July 2019 for the Haitians in the U.S. under the program to return to Haiti, although the ongoing instability in the country had previously led the Obama administration to renew the TPS protections. It's the second time this month that Trump has shown the door to a group of displaced immigrants, following an earlier decision to revoke permission for about 2,500 Nicaraguans to stay in the country. And it leaves other immigrants living under an offer of temporary protection in the U.S., wondering if they could be next. And joining me now are Patrick Gaspard, Vice President of the Open Society Foundations, Jacqueline Charles, Haiti correspondent for the Miami Herald, J.R. Guyot, political consultant, and Marlene Bastien, Executive Director of FAM, an organization that advocates for Haitian women in Miami. Thank you all for being here. And Jackie, I'm going to go to you on this first. It's good to talk to you. The acting Secretary for Homeland Security, Elaine Duke, said this in addition to her previous statement. She said significant steps have been taken to improve the stability and quality of life for Haitian citizens, and Haiti is able to safely receive traditional levels of returned citizens. Just based on your reporting, is that true?
Based on my reporting, no, it is not true. I mean, what's interesting is that they have yet to provide us the matrix on which they made this decision. Yes, Haiti just elected a new president. Yes, the United Nations pulled out its military force, but they are still present. They have a smaller mission, and even they consider Haiti to still be problematic in the sense that it remains under Chapter 7. So if the United Nations believes that Haiti still requires a lot of assistance, I don't understand when they talk about significant steps, because we're still waiting to see what exactly the administration considers to be those steps.
And JR, we know that as of June, there was a story in the New York Times talking about the cholera mini epidemic that was brought to Haiti by the UN workers. About roughly 10,000 Haitians have died, and nearly 1 million have been sickened since cholera was introduced into Haiti in 2010 by infected United Nations peacekeepers from Nepal. Studies show the cholera bacteria came from poor sanitation by the peacekeepers. There have been other issues, obviously, that the island nation has continued to face. You've been back and forward to Haiti several times over the past year. In your view, is Haiti ready to absorb 60,000 people being expelled from the United States?
Absolutely not. I've been back 8 times this year alone. I was just there the past weekend. Haiti is not ready. There's a shortage of housing. There are no jobs. You are talking about people here who are contributing to society, who are paying taxes. Don't forget, there's 27,000 children also not factored into that 60,000. These children are U.S. citizens. They were born here. Over half of these, 30,000 of them own homes. They are paying mortgages. And it's a failure of the administration. The administration has been anti-immigration from the start, and I get it, it's temporary, but there are steps that need to be taken in order to stabilize Haiti for these people to get the opportunity to come back to the country.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely not ready.
And Marlene, you know, and I've known you a long time. You've been fighting for TPS. You've fought for it, you know, every day since the 2010 earthquake. You've been fighting for Haitian citizens in Miami or Haitian Americans for such a long time. This was hard-won TPS. Can you just, for our viewers who aren't familiar with it, how difficult was it to even get this to happen, TPS, and how devastating will it be for the community to lose it?
Yes, it took a long time, many years of organizing locally, statewide, and nationally. And it was only after the earthquake, which killed over 250,000 people and quasi-destroy Haiti's infrastructure, that then President Obama did approve a temporary protected status. It also took bipartisan support and organizing with tens and hundreds of organizations nationwide. So what it means to the thousands of families is that, you know, they will probably, if nothing is done, if Congress doesn't act, to pack their bags. It is a very difficult thing to ask them to do. How do you ask parents to separate from their children, especially when we know that Haiti is not ready? Because I led a fact-finding mission to Haiti in August, from August 14th to the 21st, and I went to the border of Ansa-Pitre, where deportees, Dominicans from the Dominican Republic, have been living in squalor and conditions not fit for a human being since 2013. The Haitian government has not been able to absorb them or to offer them any support. So this decision has thrown thousands of families in a high level of anxiety and a state of panic.
And, you know, Patrick, you know, Haiti is one of several countries that are, you know, under the protection of TPS. And we just put up the graphic there. El Salvador is the largest number of TPS recipients. Haiti is third behind Honduras. The idea that, you know, this is a relatively small number of people, quite frankly, in a country of 322 million people. The idea that there's some urgency to kicking these people out, given the state of countries like Haiti, it seems so sort of nakedly cruel. As somebody who's been in the administration, you were a part of the Obama administration, can you rationalize any reason why an administration would want to reverse TPS for these 60,000 people and the others that they are kicking out?
No, Joy, I can't rationalize this at all. As the Archbishop of Miami said in response to this decision, you don't make America great by making America mean. Jacqueline's reporting has been absolutely stellar on this issue, and she's asking the right question when she says that we really need to see the metrics that we used here to make this decision. Of course, as you know, I was part of the Obama administration. Marlene Bastien was one of the incredible advocates who came to see me and others in the administration constantly on this issue. And she will tell you that we were absolutely scrupulous about making certain that the White House did not impose politics on a decision that needed to be governed by the Secretary of Homeland Security. Here, we have direct and clear evidence that the Chief of Staff in the White House interfered with the TPS decision, and that more likely than not, it's been determined by ideology instead of facts on the ground. I was in Haiti a few short months ago, and like your other guests, observed that the country is not yet prepared, particularly following the cholera outbreak that was caused by UN peacekeepers, and the country is still recovering from the devastating earthquake. The U.S. has a long and complicated history with Haiti. This decision shouldn't be seen outside of the context of that history. The U.S. is implicated in a lot of the challenges that yet persist on that island nation and needs to be part of solutions going forward, which is why we have to turn to Congress and the Senate now to try to undo this mess that the Trump administration has created.
Yeah, and Jackie, let's go back and talk about the origins of this decision a little bit. We know that John Kelly, who was the former head of the Homeland Security Department, who's now the Chief of Staff in the White House, has been very adamantly against things like DACA. Is there any evidence that this is a policy that came from when he was leading it, or is this the interim's sort of lead in trying to undo TPS for Haitians?
Well, we have to remember, before the decision was taken earlier this year to only extend TPS for 6 months to Haiti, Kelly actually visited Haiti. And I spoke with him when he came back, and I asked him about what was the conversation he had with the Haitian president, Jovenel Moïse. And he says he basically told Moïse to prepare to bring your people back, and that the president had laid out a series of arguments, but most of all had said that they were preparing to help Haitians get their documents at the time. And I asked Kelly, have you made up your mind what you're going to do in the fall when you have to revisit this decision? And he said no, but at the same time I felt that, that this was sort of the final reprieve that they were going to give Haitians. And we also have to remember that there was a story earlier this year that the Associated Press broke about how the administration was asking for the criminal histories of Haitians in trying to determine the TPS decision. There was also a recommendation prior to the 6-month announcement that Haitians should no longer receive TPS. So when you look at this and you build up to this moment, you say, well, you know what, how much thought really went into this decision? I know that Elaine Duke spent a lot of time talking to a lot of people. She spoke to the Haitian ambassador to the U.S. on several occasions, as well as the foreign minister. And I felt that she really wanted to arrive at a decision, possibly an extension. But an extension with a final deadline, that's not things that people were actually expecting given the current reality of Haiti today.
Yeah, and Marlene, FAM is the most prominent Haitian American advocacy organization in Miami. Did you have any contact from the administration before this decision was made? Did anyone reach out to you?
None at all. We've tried time and times again to get a meeting with either Acting Secretary Elaine Duke or anyone from the Trump administration. Even those who organized that Little Haiti meeting when President Trump, then candidate Trump, claimed that he wanted to be Haiti's best champion. Even those who organized those meetings have not been able to secure a meeting with anyone from the administration. So we are left to believe that this decision, like Patrick indicated, was made based on politics and ideology rather than facts, hard facts on the ground.
And JR, obviously there is a congressional delegation from South Florida. It is the largest Haitian population in the United States, and Haitian American population is in Miami. We know Ileana Ros-Lehtinen has spoken out against this decision. Have there been any responses from members of Congress from South Florida to this decision?
Every member of Congress from South Florida, even Northeast Florida, even the Republicans from the governor on down to Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Nelson, Representative Ted Yoho, Alcee Hastings, Frederica Wilson, are all in support of the extension of TPS.
Yeah.
So we're at a critical point right now that it doesn't seem that the situation is going to be reversed. The decision is not going to be reversed. So I think we ought to focus on what we need to do from this point on forward. And there's a couple of things, in my opinion, that we need to focus on. There's a House bill introduced by Representative Yvette Clarke out of New York, H.R. 4384, and a similar bill by Senator Van Hollen, Senate Bill 2144. I'm asking the President of the United States, Mr. President, if you're listening, if you're watching this, call Speaker Ryan, call Senator Mitch McConnell, bring these bills to the floor for a vote.
Yeah.
This is a critical situation. And also, Haiti is still waiting for the hospital that was promised after the earthquake to be built. Sure. We need to focus on that.
Yeah.
There is also the Phoenix project, a 30-megawatt project to bring electricity to the island that started back under the former Prime Minister Laurent Lamotte, that was blocked by the, Secretary Clinton and the Obama administration. We need to focus on that.
And lastly, I'm going to give the last word to you on this, Patrick. What can our viewers do who are concerned about this situation? Are there organizations in place that that people can reach out to if they want to help?
Well, first of all, I would ask that people support the work of incredible, committed advocates like Marlene Bastien, who's really a hero in the community. But if you're a part of Move On, if you're a part of Indivisible, make certain that this is elevated in the agenda of those organizations. This goes far beyond Florida, Joy. Senator Feinstein is also supporting that legislation from Senator Van Hollen, and the American Chamber of Commerce and the Building Association also recognize the economic disaster that would be here in the U.S. and in Haiti if these immigrants are returned. Let's support these Senate bills. Let's continue to organize, lift up advocacy on this issue, and let's demand that the U.S. Congress, call your Congress members, write them, demand that the U.S. Congress address this issue. And I have respect for JR, but I don't anticipate that Donald Trump and his administration will do anything compassionate on immigration for Haitians or for the Dreamers who are in a similar situation.
Yeah, well, we'll get those pieces of legislation posted. We'll put those on our social media so our viewers can know what they are. I want to thank you, Patrick Gaspard, Jacqueline Charles, J.R. Gaillot, and Marlene Bastien. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you. And up next, Donald Trump and Paul Ryan turn the season of giving into the season of taking. I'll tell you how after the break.
We're using what's called the Byrd rule in the Senate. We're using reconciliation so that we only need 50 votes in the Senate instead of 60. In order to do that, the certain proposals can only have certain economic impact. And one of the ways to game the system is to make things expire. A lot of this is a gimmick. Obamacare was a gimmick to get through these rules in the Senate.
Trump is expected to meet with Senate Republicans on Tuesday to help sell at least 50 Republican lawmakers on the Senate's version of a conservative tax cut plan that went through the House last week. There are a couple of key differences between the House plan and the Senate plan. For example, the Senate bill would repeal the individual mandate in the Affordable Care Act. But at least one major factor is the same: major permanent tax cuts for corporations that would add trillions of dollars to the deficit over the next 10 years, paid for by temporary tax cuts or even tax hikes on Americans who aren't rich. Joining me now, a senior political writer at 538.com, Perry Bacon Jr., Democratic pollster Fernand Amandi, National Republican consultant Caton Dawson, and Washington Post opinion writer Jennifer Rubin. Thanks all. Perry, I'm going to go to you first. The Tax Policy Center has weighed in on the Senate version of the plan. This is the Senate Finance Committee's plan. And it says the following: some taxpayers would pay more in taxes under the proposal in 2019 and 2025, about 9% of taxpayers in 2019 and 12% in 2025. In 2027, however, taxes would increase for 50% of taxpayers. In the middle income quintile, 28% would receive a tax cut and 66% would get a tax increase. I'm wondering just what you're hearing about the politics of raising taxes on about 1 in 10 taxpayers a year before the presidential election.
They seem to think, and you heard Mulvaney talk about this a little bit, is two things. First of all, when you get to 2027, there's a lot of people with tax increases, but they're saying those will go away, basically. It's a gimmick. We'll cut taxes in 2025, and it won't be permanent. So that's what Mulvaney was saying. But overall, the Republicans seem to think the argument that most people will get a tax decrease will work, even if you have millions of people get a tax increase. They think that the tax increases are spread out a lot, and one thing is the target of the tax increases is particularly people in California, New York, New Jersey, because of getting rid of the deduction for state and local income taxes, and those people don't vote for Republicans already. So part of the thing that's going on here is there are some tax increases targeted to people that don't vote for Republicans, and Republicans don't say that, but they're pretty much fine with those.
But, and Caton Dawson, I've talked with friends in Georgia, the mayor of Columbus, and she pointed out to me that, Georgians are going to pay more under that tax break that's supposedly targeted to blue states that didn't vote for Donald Trump. But, you have Georgians that'll pay more, too, if you get rid of that state and income tax deduction. But the other target for this is people with very low income. A little bit more, this is a New York Times article about the Joint Committee on Taxation's conclusions about the bill. If the Senate bill becomes law, Americans earning $30,000 a year or below would pay higher taxes beginning in 2021 than they will if the bill is not enacted. The projected increase stems from the repeal of the ACA mandate that most people have to buy health insurance. How does the Republican Party sell the idea of actually raising taxes on the lowest income Americans?
Well, one of the things I'll talk about politics in general is I don't think a lot of American public is concerned about 2027, 2025. They're concerned about 2018 and 2019. And what they do see is the doubling of the standard deduction. 69% of Americans don't itemize deductions on their tax returns. So you're getting a large swath of Americans who are going to get what they seem to be instant tax relief. But again, the politics of this are they won't feel that till 2019. And that'll be after the 2018 midterms. So a lot of things can happen there. It's Perry's very spot on when he talks about the states that are going to get hit the hardest on the deductions and losing the state and income tax and property tax deductions in their states. So at the end of the day, when you start talking about taxes, Republicans can't make the mistake of Mitt Romney of saying 47% of Americans don't pay federal income taxes, whether that's true or not. But about everyone in America, whether you're minimum wage or not, is paying 39% taxes on every dollar they make because it's fees, local taxes, local assessments. So taxes are a concern to everyone. It's just a matter of what you identify politically is who caused them. And the Republicans now, with Donald Trump, I mean, they've got 2018 coming, and if they don't show a bill passed with a Republican majority in the House and a Republican majority in the Senate, regardless of the blocking of the Democrats, they'll have hell to pay at the ballot box in 2018.
And, you know, it's interesting because I think Kate makes an important point, Fernand, that, you know, Republicans are under a lot of pressure from their donors who are ordering them to pass something that looks like a tax cut for the rich. You know, it's what they want. So they have to do it, right? They have to try to do it. But I'm wondering if even the Democrats would be able to message against a tax increase on middle-class people to pay for permanent tax cuts for corporations and the rich. That sounds simple enough even for Democrats to be able to message against.
You know, it does, but I mean, I was listening to Caden's point, and it's rather incoherent because he can't even defend the policy here, Joy. Look, what are the Republicans saying here? It aims at poor people, so it's a good thing to do. And the Republicans define poor people as anybody who's not in the 1% of Americans. Let's get past the stark, raving hypocrisy of the fact that this tax bill, the way it's constituted, would add trillions of dollars to the deficit. The same Republican Party who, when President Obama was managing the ship of state, shut down the government over anything that hinted at a deficit, yet they're willing to do it here again. I also think back to the history. How many times have they tried to sell us on this sugar-coated tax cut plan, which was disastrous for the economy, that ended up basically unraveling and bringing us to the brink? We saw it in the Bush administration. We see it again now. I don't think there's any credibility in Joy. That's why the polling around this tax cut plan, you look at it, only about 26% of Americans support it, nearly 63%, depending on which poll you look at or against it. It is deeply unpopular.
Yeah, and Jennifer, you know, I think that's an important point because you see in the polling that it's gotten through to the majority of people, at least in these polls, that the tax cut would be at their expense and help the rich. The other thing I think is weird is Mick Mulvaney, quite frankly. He is a weird messenger on this because he doesn't seem embarrassed about saying, yeah, we're going to hike taxes on poor people and going after something that used to be sacred, Social Security disability. This is Donald Trump. This is a pull quote from a political profile of Mulvaney in September. And he says, look, this is my idea how to reform Social Security, the former South Carolina congressman began. No, the president replied. I told people we wouldn't do that. What's next? Well, here are some Medicare reforms, Mulvaney then says. No, Trump repeated, I'm not doing that. Then he goes to, okay, disability insurance, which he considers Social Security disability insurance, Mulvaney does, to be welfare. Well, here's a map of the people who participate in Social Security disability insurance. It's heavily in the South. Social Security disability insurance, I think like 2/3 of the recipients are older white Americans, Trump voters. Does the Republican Party have a problem here now that they're openly talking about cutting Medicare and cutting SSDI as part of this overall package of what they call tax reform?
They should. They should have two problems. One, this is being paid for, as your other guests mentioned, not only by raising taxes eventually on those middle-class people, but they're going to have to cut services across the board. This is going to exert a pressure on spending that mostly benefits middle and lower-income Americans. Now, beyond that, I think you have the real issue that for Republicans, and this is where Democrats need to remember, they need to peel off Republican votes. So my suggestion to them, free advice is what you pay for, but nevertheless is to focus on the debt and the deficit. You have Republicans out there, Jeff Flake, you have Bob Corker, who say they do not want to grow the debt and the deficit. This is a deficit buster. Any analysis, whether it's the Tax Policy Center, whether it's the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, anyone that you look at, we're going to be adding trillions to the debt. So if those Republicans, some of whom don't have to stand for election, want to go out as principled Republicans, I'm talking to you, Bob Corker, I'm talking to you, Jeff Flake, and want to be true to their values, they shouldn't be supporting this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. All right, lightning round. Let's see if this is going to pass. Caton Dawson, best in the business at prognosticating Republican politics. Does this bill, either the Senate version or the House version, ultimately pass and become law?
It'll hit conference committee and it'll pass because the politics behind it beat the policy, and Republicans are going to need to show a victory for 2018 midterms.
But do you think that raising people's taxes will ultimately hurt them on the politics?
I think cutting corporation taxes, doubling the standard deductions, talking about the economic activity that will come with it will win the day. The Republicans will be the people who cut taxes, and the Democrats will be the ones who want to raise taxes. That'll be the political message.
Okay, that's the old way that politics used to work, Perry Bacon Jr. Will it work that way this time? Will this pass, and will Republicans be glad it passed?
I think it will pass because Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell and the donors really want it to pass. So I think that's a different direction of whether it should pass or whether it's good politics. I don't think it's good politics in part because you're going to have a lot of these members in swing districts where this bill raises, if you're in an upper income district, this might raise taxes in those areas. So I think it's actually probably not good politics, and you'll see some members in close districts vote against it. But I think overall it probably will pass.
Fernand Amandi, my friend from Florida, expert on politics, all things politics. Does it pass, and will Republicans regret it if it does?
Well, on this Thanksgiving weekend, I am thankful for the founders because, Joy, I think you see a lot of political posturing going on. But when it comes time to cast the vote, no way in hell 3 Republicans of conscience are going to let this lemon be sold to the American people. Does not pass. Another goose egg for Donald Trump.
All right, on this show, we like to give the ladies the last word, so I'm going to Jennifer Rubin for the final word. Does it pass, and do Republicans regret it?
Not this. Something will pass, and they'll declare victory over it. And it won't help them in 2018 because as you say, Joy, even Democrats can figure out a way to run against this. Repealing the estate tax? What, so Ivanka doesn't have to worry about ever paying a dime of inheritance tax?
Yeah.
Come on.
I'm so mean to the Democrats. I know I am. Sorry, but it's true. All right, well, this is a great panel. We're going to keep them around because we love these guys so much. And coming up, the not-so-secret plot to destroy Obamacare. But first, American Pie Wars.
April is just upset because the only thing she know how to cook and serve is the very fake news. That's right. And what we want to know, she keep questioning me that she want proof of Sarah Huckabee's pie. Well, we want proof that she's really a journalist. Okay, because when we look at the whole ordeal, she ain't no more a journalist than Miss Piggy was married to Carmen. That's right. So we want to know her proof because we really never heard of her until this administration. She just trying to be relevant.
Obamacare is finished. It's dead. It's gone. It's no longer, you shouldn't even mention, it's gone. There is no such thing as Obamacare anymore. It is and I said this years ago, it's a concept that couldn't have worked.
Despite Donald Trump's constant claims that Obamacare is dead and imploding, it's actually alive and well. In fact, within the first 3 weeks of open enrollment, Obamacare signups actually topped 2 million. But another popular program, the Children's Health Insurance Program, known as CHIP, is on the brink of collapse, putting close to 9 million low-income children and women at risk of losing their health care if Congress doesn't act to renew it. Back with me now, Perry Bacon Jr., Fernand Amandi, Caton Dawson, and Jennifer Rubin. And Fernand, I'll start with you first. We know that Florida has a large abundance of people who are on CHIP. In a state like that, can the members of Congress from Florida afford not to push to renew CHIP, and why haven't they pushed for it?
It's an excellent question, Joel. You know, Florida and many other states would be decimated, Florida's children, other children. And I think it leads to the question, is it any surprise that the party that is pro-pay-for-play, pro-Putin, and now with Roy Moore, pro-pedophilia, the fact that they're anti-children, is that any surprise? I don't think it is. And I think, Joy, this is emblematic, this CHIP scenario where you mentioned 9 million children without health insurance. I think if you take a step back, one has to ask themselves, and I think the American people should ask themselves the broader question, what has the Republican Party in the last 10 years done to help the American people? What have they done? This is not a political party. This is a domestic terror group. And what I think the American people should consider when they ask themselves that question with a party that has done nothing to help the American people is to vote them out and consider possibly afterwards locking them up, Joy.
Well, I'm going to go to Caton on that. I'm sure Caton has thoughts on that. Caton, I know you're not a fan of the Affordable Care Act, but can the party really, get away with the idea of not renewing this program? It's 9 million kids.
I would predict to you that the party or the politicians will find a way to make this palatable and affordable, and they already have addressed it in the House. It's pretty tough to leave 9 million children behind, and that won't happen. At the end of the day, we're still talking about the Affordable Care Act. I understand why Donald Trump is taking zero ownership of it. That's good politics, and from his standpoint, that's where he'll stay. So I would predict to you that children matter no matter what side of the aisle you're on. You can make it as political as you care to. For 8 years, we had President Obama. We've now got President Trump. It cuts across all lines. That program will stay safe, and it will be, in the end of the day, being funded. Now, where they'll find the money to replace that, that's a whole nother question, because as we know, the collapse of the rates and the increases in the Affordable Care Act are now coming home in 2017, and the jury's still out on who owns health care.
Well, I mean, we know that the individual market is having some issues, Perry Bacon Jr. They could just fix it, but they have chosen not to do that. They want to get rid of the whole thing lock, stock, and barrel. Just looking at the statistics on children's health care, now 8.9 million children were covered by it in 2016. Approximately 337,000 pregnant women receive care yearly. CHIP and Medicaid brings uninsured kids rates down to just 5%. And this was, of course, the program Hillary Clinton pushed when she was First Lady, when she couldn't get through Hillary Care. The alternative was to put through this program for kids. The Chicago Tribune reports that states are already preparing to shut down the program because even though Caton says that it's something that will be renewed, it hasn't been. They're dragging their feet on doing it. What is the delay in your reporting? Like, what is going on? Why hasn't this been renewed?
Basically, the leaders in the party have said, we'll get to it later. They basically want to get to this after tax reform, and I'm not totally sure why. And they argue that states have not run out of money yet. I guess they haven't technically run out of dollars yet. They are getting close to that. In terms of the politics, this seems like a mistake to me. We look at data a lot at 538, and one thing you see this year is Trump's numbers were not really killed as much by the Rust investigation. What has really dropped Trump in the polls were those months and months where the Republicans kept pushing Medicaid cuts, and the public does not support that. And Medicaid, S-CHIP is basically like the children version of Medicaid. That's the same kind of program. And so again, I'm not sure, this doesn't make any political strategy point to me. There's a debate about whether there should be offsets for this CHIP money. And even that, to me, ultimately the Republicans are going to have to fund this program because it's very popular. So I'm not sure why